Let's see, we left off here. Let's go back on page 156 here. Remember, this whole chapter is talking about the need for the tribulation, why we need it. And taking off on verse 71, that's the second to last paragraph in the right-hand column there on page 156. It says, the same beastly system has this mouth. And by the way, that word mouth is one of the vocabulary words. And it means propaganda, notice. That is propaganda. This beastly system has this mouth. That is propaganda, as this word shows here, to speak against and to blaspheme Yahweh. Now, in the 1600s, Pope Gregory XV, they had the Protestant Reformation and stuff, and so Pope Gregory XV came up with the Sacred Congregation of Propaganda, and this was an office that he set up to help them out, because to help the church recover from the Reformation, basically, because remember they lost a lot of members and stuff when the Protestants came about. And so the Sacred Congregation of Propaganda, the Sacred Congregation is the department of the pontifical administration charged with the spread of Catholicism and with the regulation of ecclesiastical, that's dealing with the church, affairs in non-Catholic countries. The intrinsic importance of its duties and the extraordinary extent of its authority and of the territory under its jurisdiction have caused the cardinal prefect, which is just a high official of propaganda, to be known as the Red Pope. Okay, this was something that they came up with, exactly what it is, propaganda. To go in to try and convince people through propaganda to go back to the Catholic Church. So you see here where it talks about this beastly system has this mouth, that is propaganda, and this word shows here to speak against and to blaspheme Yahweh. Okay, and that's exactly what they did. Now continuing on with this verse in Revelation 13:4, it continues and it says, power was given unto him to make war for 42 moons, remember. Now remember that word power, we had covered it before, but we're going to cover it again here. In Revelation 13:4, power is number 1849, and it's the power of choice, okay? Because remember, deception is a choice. You choose to be deceived. You choose to do what you want to do to find out the truth. It also means liberty of doing as one pleases. Remember Yahweh says mankind's not going to be restrained. Nothing will be restrained from mankind. He can do what he wants. But it's the liberty of doing as one pleases, with regard to which one has power to decide. And of course, he gave free will to all mankind, right? His law tells us that. That word power also means mental power. It's the ability or the strength with which one is endued, which he either possesses or exercises the authority, the power of authority to influence, because you can persuade people through influence into doing something. And this is what the office of propaganda here was set up for, in order to do that, to try and persuade people that they needed to belong back to the Catholic Church. And of course, what they did is they went to non-Christian nations, they tried to hit up the places where the Christians hadn't first gone to, okay, to try and deceive them and so forth, or force them into the Catholic Church again. So going back to the book here, it says, so power was given to him to make war for 42 moons. And of course, think about it. It is a power of choice. When you have wars, you have to have people who fight those wars. And those soldiers willingly enlist to go to war and so forth. So it's a power of choice that they do to go to join the military. Well, this is the last 42 moons of war. We have already had 6,000 years of war. So it's speaking of a certain time period that the beastly system is making war. Now, Revelation 6, we see how this starts. Before this, Yahweh shows his house will be kept out of it. Okay, Yahweh's house will be kept out of it. And a reference for that is Revelation 7, 2 and 3. You remember it says, And I saw another Malach, another messenger, okay, another warning, another message or another warning. That's the word Malach. When you see that another Malach, it means another message or another warning is being given. Ascending from the east, having the seal of the living Father, and he cried with a loud voice to the four messengers, which of course is a quartet, to whom it was given. Notice, their power comes from the dragon, remember, it was given to them, to hurt the earth and the sea. In other words, they're going to use force to bring, quote unquote, peace. Saying, verse 3, saying, hurt not the earth, which of course will be destroyed because of defilement, neither the sea. Remember, the sea is the waters are polluted, but it's also referring to people's inhabitants, as we read, in Revelations 15. But in Isaiah 24, 1 through 6, it shows us the people and inhabitants themselves as well. Nor the trees. Remember, the trees are the religions and stuff. Until we have sealed, of course, Yahweh knows those who are his. Remember, in Philippians it tells us that. The servants of our Father in their foreheads. In other words, in their minds, which are not full of confusion and sin, okay? Those who come out of this world, their minds are released from the bondage of sin, as Yeshua said. Okay, so getting back to the book here. So before this comes, this war starts, okay, then it shows that Yahweh's house is going to be kept out of it because we choose to belong to the house of Yahweh. We choose to do righteousness, and righteousness and being a part of Yahweh's house is where the protection comes from. So he's going to keep us out of this. So he says, let's see how it starts. So now we have the quartet, which is spoken of right here. We have the quartet that is joining together. He says, it's one prophecy in Daniel that I hope that you got. It shows in the King James where one nation is coming against another king. But that's not what's showing here. It is, in actual fact, two kings or two great armies that join each other. Okay, they join the religious system in order to bring what they call democracy of liberty and peace. Now we find that, for the reference, is in Revelations 9, 13 to 16. And you see what it says, and the sixth Malach sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar, which is before Yahweh, saying to the sixth Malach, which had the trumpet, loose the four messengers, which are bound in the great river Euphrates. For the four messengers were loose, which were prepared for an hour, a day, and a moon, and a year, in order to slay the third part of men. And the number of the army of horsemen were 200,000, for I heard the number of them. Now we're going to take a look at some of this, because remember, we're going to look at six Malach, the four horns of the golden altar, and that number that is there. Okay, the six Malach. Should have unstuck all these papers. The six Malach is the word six that's written in Revelations 9, 13, and 14. It's translated from the Hebrew word bad. Okay, the word is listed on pages 179 to 180 of a Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon of the Old Testament by Julius First, which shows this word means singled out to the being alone of, or standing alone, only. I alone, solitary and alone. So the sixth Malach is correctly translated as being the last Malach. Okay. Now the four horns of the golden altar. Now remember, blood was put on the four horns of the altar, and it was poured at the base of the altar. And that's what we see here in the law. In Leviticus 4, verse 25, it says, the priest shall take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering and pour its blood at the base of the altar of burnt offering. Okay, so that blood symbolizes, of course, all the murders and the wars and the killings of people that had to be atoned for. Now, our job, of course, is going to cleanse all the blood that's shed from righteous Abel until this very day, which is shown actually in the meaning of the purification of the altar. In Leviticus 8, 14, and 15, it says, and Moshe brought the bull for the sin offering. Then Aaron and his sons laid their hands on the head of the bull for the sin offering. And, of course, they were confessing the sins of the people, and they were laying the sins on this animal, so to speak, okay? And Moshe killed it, and then he took the blood, and he put some on the horns of the altar with his finger to purify the altar. Then he poured the blood at the base of the altar, And so he consecrated and sanctified it and made atonement for it, okay? So that altar, those altars have shed a lot of blood, okay? And that blood symbolizes all the death and the killings and so forth that mankind has done. And of course, it had to be purified. You know, it wasn't continually used. The priests had to purify the altar, and they did it once a year, too. Now, the army of 200,000, okay, that's not what it says if you trace it back to the Hebrew. The pastor says this is a sermon in 5/10/2003. He says this is not what this says if you trace it back to the Hebrew. It means two great armies. If you look at the Analytical Hebrew and Chaldee Lexicon of Davison, page 672, it means many, numerous, great, powerful, large. Two armies here are going to do this, he says. So, of course, this refers to two great armies, not the literal number. And the two great armies, which are Great Britain and the United States, they joined the Roman Catholic Church in bringing the same democracy of freedom from keeping the laws of Yahweh. Okay? And that's exactly the reason why they did that with the office of propaganda there and began with all of that to begin with. Okay, let's go back to the book here. So he says, notice in verse 73, propaganda is what you are seeing over here in Revelations 13. This is propaganda against any and all of Yahweh's laws. Now remember, when peace was taken from the earth, as the scripture says, remember these armies went out, okay? Great Britain and the U.S. worked hand in hand, and of course they went out to take down those nations and to offer them freedom. Democracy, okay, or demonocracy, okay? Freedom from Yahweh's laws is what they were, keeping of Yahweh's laws is what they were doing. So this propaganda against any and all of Yahweh's law. You've seen this on the news. It says you see it right now. If you would turn the news on, he says you would see them condemning the veil or any modest dress. They're condemning the people there because these people do not want their wives to go out and commit fornication or to be taught this lustful way that they call the Western look or the Western way. They don't want it taught, okay? Because, you know, you see that's one of the righteous things about the Muslims is the fact that they dress modestly, you know, and the world can't stand that. Of course, Hollywood can't stand it, for sure. And this is why they have the, you know, as we've already covered in lessons, where the lustful clothing and so forth comes from. So, in verse 74, he says, we have all this right here in this first verse. We have the quartet that's bringing this all about to cause the people all over the world now to turn away from any of Yahweh's law and say no to Yahweh's law. Okay, and that's what the office of propaganda was about, is to go out and influence these people and to get them to join the Catholic Church because they got hurt with the Protestant Reformation at that time. And these offices are still going on. You know, they change them. They change the names ever so often, you know, every few hundred years to make it sound a little better, you know. But it's still the office of propaganda. They're not going to get away from that fact. We already know that. In fact, if you remember, I think it was Pope Benedict XVI was the head honcho over that department, if I remember right. So he says, as I told you, that is going to change. That is going to change because we're pecking at this mountain right now. And Yahweh says we're going to destroy this mountain, this uplifted place. Okay? Now that mountain, you see in the prophet Jeremiah, in Jeremiah 51, verse 24 and 26, he says, but I will repay Babylon and all the inhabitants of Chaldea before their eyes, for all the evil they did in Zion, says Yahweh. Behold, I am against you, O destroying mountain, who destroys all the earth, which of course he's talking about Babylon, the Babylonian system there in verse 24. It says Yahweh, I will stretch out my hand against you, roll you down from the rocks, and make you a burnt mountain. Of course, we know Revelations 18 talks about the burning of Rome. No rock will be taken from you for a cornerstone. You know, Yeshua already is the cornerstone. Nor any stone for a foundation. No, the foundation's already been laid for the house of Yahweh, right? the apostles and the prophets, for you will be desolate forever, says Yahweh. Once the Babylonian system is destroyed, that will be it. It will no longer exist. Okay, but we're pecking at that little mountain right now, as it says. Okay, we're working at destroying Babylon. We're pulling down the strongholds that is there in this beastly system. We're going to tear it down completely. Verse 75 here, he says, and when he had opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living one say, come and see. He says, well, this is what they're saying. Come and see what we're going to do. Look, this is what we're going to do with these nations right now. And they're pretty convincing. Our president, that was President Bush, remember, is convincing others to put money into it. Not a lot of money, but $1 or $2 and 12 troops or more. He's a little dissatisfied there, but he is convincing them that this is going to be A-OK after all. Even though he condemned it to begin with, this is what covers here. Okay? If you remember, he started off, and you remember they went and just started tearing these nations down, started going in, invading them, and freeing them, right? Just so they could take over their oil, hurt not the oil, and went in and taken over these countries just to be able to get their oil, but not only oil, but also the minerals and stuff that they had, the precious resources that they had in the ground and stuff too, in other countries. Now in verse 8 he says it covers nuclear war and death over a fourth part of the earth. And this is nuclear war that we're going to witness. Nuclear war will eventually darken the sun due to these same sins. Now notice, it's the darkening of the sun will be due to these same sins. Okay? Now if you remember on Sabbath, okay, for the workshop there, you got a lot of information there referring to the firmament. Okay? And it's due to the sins. The sins is what have changed the firmament. Okay? The mutations of the microbes and so forth that live in the firmament, which you can't see right now. When you're looking up here and I'm looking at you, all you see is just clear air. Well, it's not clear air. It's completely filled with the firmament. It's completely filled with microscopic creatures that you can't even see. But they're so small that they look transparent, so you see right through them. But they're all over the place. You're breathing them into your body, and you are expelling them as well, and all this works together to keep mankind alive, okay? But because of man's sin, he's defiling it. The earth is becoming more and more and more polluted. And this is why you can't live to as long as they did, 900 years. But your body should be able to do it. You should be able to live as long as they did way back then. But because of the sins of mankind, it affects everybody. Everybody is affected by it. Now he says, this is the buildup, the final countdown, the final great tribulation, the 42 months of war that they have allowed. The kingdom of heaven allowed this to take place and said, this will bring the finishing touch on their way. Remember, the kingdom of heaven, the courts that are set up in the heavens, okay, and Yahweh's government in itself has determined that this is part of the plan that will go through, that will actually bring mankind to perfection. He has to learn that. We just went through this freezing cold spell. We had to learn what it was like to be this way, because we know that when nuclear winter comes, it's going to be worse than what we went through. So Yahweh's giving us time to prepare, to get ready for the days ahead. But the kingdom of heaven allowed this to take place and said, this will bring the finishing touch on their way. Remember, Yahweh is putting the finishing touches on his people right now. Okay? This will bring the finishing touch on their way. This will prove to them what could go on here in the universe if we pull back the little bit of hold we have on you right now and let you loose to follow this way to your full desire, your full lustful desire. So if we didn't have to go, this is why this chapter was called the need for the tribulation. The tribulation is needful. If Yahweh, if the courts of heaven, they know, if they would pull back just a little, if Yahweh's house didn't have to suffer along with the world, but still be protected, his plan would not be able to finish what it started off to begin with. And so they can't, Yahweh will offer us protection, but we will have to go through certain things. But his protection will be with us. But if he pulled back and stopped certain things, then we'll never complete the plan. And his plan would never come to the full end. And we would never learn the full lesson from it. So we see here, it says in verse 77, we see pestilence. We see the pestilence. Okay, that's another vocabulary word, the pestilence. Pestilence is an old English word that means disease epidemics. Okay, disease epidemics that the prophet Jeremiah said were incurable, if you remember. So all of this, the hunger to kill with war over a fourth part of the earth is only speaking of the fourth part of the earth. This is not speaking of the whole earth. Okay, it's only that fourth part of the earth that it's talking about, not the whole earth. Now President Bush is saying right now it's better to fight them in their own territory than in ours. And this is just a come on to get what we want. Because this is already a setup. It was already planned. You remember General Wesley Clark, he said they're going to take down 7 countries in 5 years. Okay, and people who doubted that started seeing these nations that he named, actually were starting to come down. So it was already planned out. It's a plan of action, and they got to it. So more people are finding out about this plan, he says, and they're coming out about it. Something was sent to me the other day, he says, showing one of the religious organizations that found out some of the things that we were teaching. They were wanting to join us. Now, highlight this section here, this sentence. The only way you can join the house of Yahweh is through Yahweh himself and his laws. Okay? Highlight that part. The only way you can join the house of Yahweh is through Yahweh himself and his laws. Okay? Now, if you remember, here's a reference note for you. In Romans 8:28-30, it says, and we know that all things work together for the righteousness to those who love Yahweh, and to those who are the called out ones of his plan. Notice, it's talking about the called out ones, for whom he did foreknow. This is how he called you out. He also did foreordain. He foreordained you, notice, so that you could be conformed to the image of his Son, to be like Yeshua, that he might be the firstborn among many brothers. Because we're going to have to be like Yeshua. We've got to be like Yeshua so that we can be part of the family. Moreover, those whom he did foreordain, those are the ones that he called, notice. And whom he called, he also justified. And whom he justified, those he also glorified. If you remember, justification means righteousness, okay? Like it says about Yosef, the father of Yeshua, he said that he was a just man. He was a righteous man. Now, in Yochanan 6:65, you see where Yeshua says, and he said, this is why I said to you, no man can come to me unless it has been granted to him by my Father. Okay? Now, we understand that, but the world does not understand that. Okay? That it has to be granted by Yahweh. Yahweh has to do the calling. And then, of course, if he calls you, it's because he foreknew you, and he had foreordained you to be a part of his family, to be like Yeshua himself. Okay? So this is something that the world has no idea of. Okay, back in the book here. He says, now this organization is some kind of militant group that wants to do this by force. And if you remember, for reference, if you remember Matthew 11:12, where Yeshua said, they want to take the kingdom itself by force. Okay? But you can't force. You can't force anything. You can't force righteousness. And so a militant group cannot bring forth righteousness. So Pastor continues, he says, I'm fully convinced that you have to allow the governments to destroy themselves like Yahweh has planned. Give them enough rope and let them hang themselves and let them learn the lesson. While it's being done, in the meantime, we're like shepherds jerking a few ribs out of a lion's mouth, as Moshe said that we would be doing. And Moshe said that in Moshe 3, verse 12. He says that very same thing, that we would be pulling out a few ribs out of a lion's mouth. Okay, in other words, we'll be collecting A few people will be called out, you know. Otherwise, the beast will just, the lion, the beast will just completely devour everyone and everything, because it's been given. You know, remember, the power's been given to them by the dragon, and the dragon has full power right now over all the earth, and that's what Yeshua said as well. Remember, she came to Yeshua and she said, you know, look, Yahweh's given me all of this. All the power and authority is mine. All you got to do is just bow down and worship me, and you can have it yourself, you know. Okay, this is Revelation 13. In verse 9, he says, and when he had opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of men slain because of the word of Yahweh. Notice, these men and women, you know, they were slain because of the word of Yahweh, because they hung on to something. They hung on to the truth. They wouldn't allow themselves to buckle under and to be a part of the Catholic Church. They held on to the little bit of truth that they had. Now, they weren't the house of Yahweh. They didn't have the full knowledge and understanding that we have today, but they did stand up as a witness. So he says, I saw under the altar the souls of the men slain because of the word of Yahweh, the law, and the prophets, for because the witness held fast. And in verse 10 says, and they cried with a loud voice, saying, how long, O Yahweh, holy and true, will you judge and sentence? Now he says the word avenge because the next word was avenge. But the word avenge, he says, is not there. Okay? That's another vocabulary word, the word avenge. It's been added, it says, in every place you find it. It means, as it says, judgment, sentence, or permission, okay? Because it's a judgment of Yahweh, and also the sentences for breaking the laws of Yahweh, which brings the curses and so forth. But you also have to have permission to do certain things, okay? Everything is allowed in Yahweh's government, but you have to have permission, okay? Yeshua could not do the things that he did on earth without the permission of Yahweh. He had the permission from Yahweh to do the things he did. Because remember, he says, I'll never do anything on my own. I'll always do Yahweh's will, and he always did. So as we see in this one word, he says in just a moment, this is permission for this to take place, or the judgment to allow this to stop and to come to an end. And Yahweh and his saints would take over as Daniel showed they would. Okay, remember, Daniel uses the word that the saints will take over by force, but it's not force. It's just this word right here. It's just these same meanings. It's the judgment. It's the sentence, and they have permission to do so, because we'll never go in and just take over anything. In verse 10 it says, and the blood on those who dwell upon the earth, and white robes were given to them, and it was said to them that they should rest yet for a little season. Okay, and these words, little season, is time. Okay, it's time. So that's another vocabulary word. It means time. If you look in the diaglott, it says you will see this word season means a time. So the vocabulary word season means a time. And when it says in the diaglott, if you don't know what that is, diaglott is simply a Greek interlinear, okay, by Benjamin Wilson, right? So it gives the word for word along with the Greek words. That time, okay, that time period, he says, is just as we read, is 42 moons. How long is this going to be? Well, it's going to be 42 moons. They have been allowed 42 moons, Daniel said. It would be cut short, but he's given them that length of time to prove, to show them what their way will bring, to prove it not only to earthlings, but to heavenly beings too, and to show them what their ways will bring, okay? Now, to show it to heavenly beings as well as the earth. In Psalm 89:5, it says in the heavens, and that word heavens also means universe. In the universe, okay, they acknowledge your promise, O Yahweh, and your faithfulness in the congregation of the saints, which of course is here on earth. So you got heaven and earth there. And of course that promise It's found in Genesis 1:26, where Yahweh says, I will make man in my image, according to my likeness. And they will have authority over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth, or upon or in the earth, okay, all the microbes. And then if you remember Luke 19:38, it says, blessed be the king, they should be kings, Pastor says, they should be kings, who comes in the name of Yahweh, peace in heaven and glory in the highest. So you can see here that the universe, the beings in the universe, are looking for peace, okay? They don't have it right now, okay? They don't have it right now. They have the same thing that's going on the earth, because remember, the earth is set up as an example. Everything that goes on the earth was taught from the heavens, okay, in those matters. And so he's going to show them what their ways will bring. Remember, reference for that would be Deuteronomy 30, verse 15, that Yahweh says, I'm going to be a witness in heaven and in earth, right? So all the slaughter that's going to take place here, as it says in the book, going back to the book, all the slaughter that's going to take place will take place, okay? Because you remember he says in Revelations, he who is bound for the sword will suffer the sword. He who wants to do righteousness will suffer, will allow to be righteous and so forth. But he names the different things, captivity and so forth. Okay, he is bound for captivity, will be captive and so forth. Now, in Revelation 7, we see that this is the start of it. While this is going on, we see Yahweh's work here. This is the finishing work, as Yahweh said. This is the finishing work of Yahweh, the seventh Malach. So the finishing touches are being put on the house of Yahweh. This is why, we really, really, really have to be examining ourselves. Are we like Yahweh? Remember, Revelations 10:7 says that when the seventh messenger sounds, then the secrets of Yahweh would be finished. Well, now the secrets of Yahweh are being revealed, remember. But it's only being revealed through the seventh Malach to the house of Yahweh. And the house of Yahweh is the only ones that understand what the secrets of Yahweh are. And remember, if you go back in Deuteronomy, Yahweh says the secret things belong to Yahweh, but to those things which he will reveal these things to his people. So this will bring to completion this great and marvelous plan, as the psalmist said. We don't even realize, we have no idea how Yahweh looks at us right now. All we see is the human faults. We see the human side of the way that we are. But Yahweh sees our insides. Yahweh is the one who's working within us. Right? He's working in us. He's changing our DNA. He's changing the entire structures of our bodies right now. Yes, we have, failings with our health and so forth, but inwardly, he's changing these things, because one day it's all going to be completely renewed. And even our minds, because we don't have access to these things right now, but we will one day. When the completion time comes, remember Philippians 1:6, it says, Yahweh has started a work in us, and he will bring it to perfection. He's going to complete it and bring it to perfection. And it also says, don't quench Spirit Holy. Don't quench the work of Yahweh within our lives. Let him have the full reign. So this will bring to completion this great, marvelous plan, as the psalmist said. In Revelation 7:1, he says, and after these things I saw 4 angels here, or malachim, okay? Now, this is another vocabulary word. It'd be malachim or angels, whichever one the test we use. But that's the quartet, okay? These 4 are the quartet. These 4 messengers here is the quartet. So that's one of the vocabulary words. We just saw over here, he says, standing on the 4 corners of the earth, notice. Standing on the 4 corners of the earth. The earth must be a cube. It must be flat. Well, yeah, that cracks me up. You got to be the dumbest idiot in the world to believe that the earth is flat, When the scriptures describe it perfectly as being a round globe in turns. All these things, prophets knew all these things. Even the Psalms, when it says, let the earth be glad, look at the word glad. It means to revolve around. That the earth spin on its axis. It's basically what it's saying, you know. It's so simple. These things that are written in the scriptures are so clear. And the prophets knew this thousands of years ago. You know, they weren't ignorant of what Yahweh created. But you still have that foolishness going on. Okay, so he says, you know, standing on the four corners of the earth simply is referring to the directions, north, south, east, and west. Points of a compass. So they had the power in their hands to do this, holding the four winds of the earth. Now remember, those four winds were the winds of war, okay? Coming from all directions, in other words, okay? On the earth, so that the wind would not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. Remember, as we saw earlier, all those things. And I saw another Malach, a messenger, ascending from the east, having the seal, okay, the seal of Yahweh. This is another vocabulary word. Remember the word seal. You seal Yahweh's people with the laws, okay? So the sealing of Yahweh is the fact that you know, understand, and live by the laws of Yahweh. So there's another vocabulary word. But this is what I've done, he says, and the priests have done with you. By teaching the law, you are sealed in your mind, okay? By teaching the law, you're sealed in your mind. You're sealed because of the fact that if you teach these things, that means you believe them and you live by them, okay? The seal of the living Father. And he cried out with a loud voice to the four messengers to whom it was given to hurt the earth. You know, you can hurt the earth in many, many different ways, and not just war. I mean, war has done the most damage, you know, because of the fact that the blood has gone into the earth. You remember the law of Yahweh says the blood was supposed to be covered. You slaughter an animal, you're supposed to cover the blood with the earth, okay, because the microbes would do their job and clean it up, okay, and take care of it. But with all these killings and stuff, when people are just, you know, piled up and have them, and all the blood is scattered, people in the cities don't even realize it. When there's murders in the streets and there's blood's pouring out on the street, what do? They come along and spray the stuff with water. Where are they putting it? It's going right down into the city drains, which is going to the treatment plants, which are going to turn right around and go home and open up the tap and drink it. You know? They're so foolish in the fact that they don't even realize what they're doing. So there's so many different things and ways you can hurt the earth that they have brought down the health. They've brought down the immunity of man. The immune system is a very powerful, powerful thing that Yahweh has done with our bodies, and this is what keeps us alive. You know, we're very frail. Our bodies are very frail, but it's amazing the amount of power that you have within your body. You know, I think it's something like, I think one time I saw something about like on your ankles, like when you jump. I think you put like about 5,000 pounds of pressure on your ankles. You know, something like that, if I remember right. But it's amazing the amount of power and things that your body can produce. Same as your jaws. Think about it. When you crack something, the amount of power that you have with your jaws, cracking a nut or something like that, or just chewing something that is hard, you know, cracking ice and so forth. There's a tremendous amount of power that's put forth in that. And you don't even think about it. You just chew, you know. You don't think about any of these things. But notice he says these four malachim, okay, they're given to hurt the earth. This is the quartet. Okay, remember quartet means four. Boing, boing. You remember that? Every time you hear four, boing, boing. Okay, this is the quartet. It's in their minds, notice, to ascend to or to expand Israel to the great river Euphrates, which was a prophecy that was actually promised to Abraham. Okay, this was actually promised to Abraham. Now, this was back in Genesis 15, 18 through 21. This is in about 1913 BY, okay? So Abraham's original promise of territory was given in Genesis 15, 18 through 21. He says, on that day Yahweh made a covenant with Abram, saying to your descendants, okay, his descendants, I will give this land. I have given this land from the river of Egypt to the great river Euphrates. That was a large, large area. The land of the Canaanites, and Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, and the Rephites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgasites, and the Jebusites. Jebusite, okay, that was, you know what that's at? Jerusalem, exactly. That's the people who lived there before King David took it over, okay? Now, in 1451, when Moshe was sent to bring the children of Israel out of Egypt, they were told that they could obtain that land that was promised by Father Abraham. In Deuteronomy 17:1, it says, when Yahweh your Father brings you into the land that you're going to possess, and has thrust out many nations from in front of you, the Hittites, Girgasites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites should be in there too, shouldn't it? Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations larger and stronger than you. Now, if you remember, I don't know whether you counted them or not, but in Genesis 15, okay, there were 10 nations that are named there. Now, about 500 years later, it was actually 400-something years, but about almost 500 years later, you can see that it's not strange that 3 of them were either destroyed by foreign or domestic wars, or they could have cohabitated and married within and become united with somebody else. Or either that, they were swallowed up in the remaining 7 ones that lasted, okay? So we see here that this is what was given to Abraham, okay? This was originally promised to Abraham. And the scriptures does say that they're going to expand the borders, okay? The prophecies speak about this. And so the neighbors right around there, you can see that they're going to get invaded. So returning to the book here, it says, of course, they're going to take it before Abraham is resurrected. Nevertheless, he says they're going to take it, and their minds are set on doing so, to move Israel to that position. Israel is a very small nation, but it's an extremely powerful nation. It's very powerful. You don't mess with them. I remember back when they had, the time when they talked about the wars and stuff, when they were ready to go in and stuff, and they would actually dig into the sand and stuff and have their tanks to where, if the enemy troops came up, all of a sudden they just dig out of that, right back up on top and attack them. They wouldn't even know that they were even there. I mean, they're very powerful. They're one of the fiercest armies in the world, really. So he says they're going to move Israel to that position all the way across from Israel, across Syria and the Golan Heights until the great river Euphrates. If you look at a map, that's a big, long area, because they're talking about going back to the Nile River, in Egypt, the river of Egypt, as it talks about, all the way to the Euphrates River. It's a very wide area that is there. And, of course, it takes over Syria, okay, all that area. And they cried to these 4 Malachim, or these 4, the quartet, to whom it was given to hurt the earth. That's the quartet which is going to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, hurt not the earth and the sea, till we have sealed these people in their foreheads. The people of Yahweh are the saints of Yahweh in their foreheads, okay? In your mind. Remember, the mark of the beast says that they give unto themselves a mark, okay? Remember, that's that word power. They give themselves, the power is given to the beast by the dragon, okay? The people willingly decide. They choose to take on the mark of the beast. And as Revelation 13 says, they give unto themselves, I think, verse 16? They give unto themselves the mark of the beast, okay? They give these things to themselves. Well, that's just the opposite of what Yahweh's mark is, okay? You choose not to be deceived. You choose to come out of sin. You choose to worship Yahweh. You choose to be a part of his house and his work in these last days. And so, therefore, you are sealed with Yahweh's laws in your forehead, in your mind. Verse 84. He says, Now, these four messengers here also permit or encourage this blasphemy that you see. Of course, just as we said, they're working together with the Roman Catholic Church, okay, to go out and to do this through this propaganda, which they try to achieve to get people to have freedom from keeping the laws of Yahweh. Revelation 13:5 is also saying that these two armies are joined together here. They were saying we're going to change these laws here. We're going to bring liberty, and we're going to bring freedom and have democracy and liberty. We're going to triumph over our enemies here. This is not the freedom to keep the laws of Yahweh, but freedom from the laws of Yahweh that tell you not to practice this lustful way of life. Okay? And so they're putting these things on the people. And you know, Satan knows. Satan is very powerful, and she has control over this whole earth, remember. And this is how she's deceived the whole world. But she's very powerful, and she uses this attraction, this lustful way of life. It's very, very strong. It's a very strong pull to the human body, to the human mind. And so this lustful way of life is why mankind has fallen to begin with. Now remember, lust covers a lot. You know, you can lust for power, you can lust for sex, you can lust for fame and so forth, you know, or riches and so forth. It's a very strong desire. It's a very strong way of life that is against Yahweh, okay? It's the lustful way of life is lusting after the freedom from the laws, not wanting to keep the laws of righteousness, seeking everything that is against Yahweh's way. So the United States is involved in this thing right here, he says, as you notice in Revelation 13:11. Okay, highlight this part. It says, this is the USA. Revelation 13:11. This is the USA. It is speaking of when it said another beastly system coming up out of the earth where there are no multitudes, nations, and tongues. In fact, the U.S. is the only place that fulfills this. It also has the two horns, the Catholic and the Christian religions. Revelation 13:4 says it has two horns like a lamb, but both horns speak as the dragon. Okay? All of that. Because you remember, it describes that. It says that this beast comes up out of the earth, not out of the sea. The one out of the sea, the first beast, came up where there were nations and so forth. This one comes up out of the earth where there is none. And you remember, just like the whole reason why the United States had to be established is so that the house of Yahweh would have a place to be established in the last days. Now, it couldn't have been earlier. It couldn't have been in colonial days because, you know, remember, they came here for freedom of religion. But it couldn't have been in the colonial days because it had to be in the last days. Okay? It had to be in the last days. It couldn't have been in the colonial days. And as it says, it has two horns like a lamb, but the horns speak as the beast, as the dragon, right? Of course, the two horns is the Catholic and Christian religions. And remember, horn means power, okay? The religious powers, okay? So you've got the Catholic and you've got the Protestant. And this is why the Catholic, you know, they're one and the same, you know. They're all part of this beastly system. The beast has two horns, okay, but it's one beast, okay? But that one beast has two horns, the Catholics and the Protestants, because the Protestants are nothing more than, quote-unquote, Reformed Catholics, because they keep all the Catholic doctrines. Remember, they keep Sunday, and that's what the Catholic Church says. It says, you know, you call yourself a Protestant, what are you protesting? You're keeping our law, which says keep Sunday. You know, so if you keep Sunday, you're a Catholic. It doesn't matter, you know, what you want to name yourself. You're still practicing the Catholic faith. So he says they speak or they carry the same message of the dragon as the first one did. They're speaking of the same religion, teaching the same lustful way that the first one did. This is going on in the United States. You know, and the thing is with the United States, if we're known for the fact that we have a lot of freedoms that other countries don't have, you know. And so you're free to do whatever you want to do, basically. As long as you're not breaking one of man's laws, you can do whatever you want to do. You know, anything that is against the laws of Yahweh, you can go and you can do in public, as long as it doesn't break a law of man. Okay? In other countries, they wouldn't allow that. You know, you can walk into a grocery store wearing nothing if you want it, as long as you got shoes, because the manager will tell you, well, let's see, you got shoes on? Okay, that's all the company policy says. All you got to do is wearing shoes. If you don't have any shoes on, yeah, you won't be able to come in. But if you got shoes on, yeah, you can come on in, you know. I mean, this is the deformity of man's mind. This is how decrepit they've become. And you can ask the managers at the store, because I know somebody who did. And he said, oh, he said, the thing is, they just have to, if they meet the requirement of what we say, then that's all the company says that you can do. And if you try and go against that, you have a lawsuit slapped on your hands, you know, and they're not going to do that. So it's freedom to do as you please. Okay, so in verse 86 he says, the two armies that you see here that join together so powerfully to do the job in Iraq and Afghanistan, well, Great Britain and the United States. Okay, Great Britain and the United States. Remember the United States, they came from Great Britain. They wanted freedom from Britain when they came here and so forth. And they had, remember the British came and they had the war and the American Revolution and all this stuff, you know, to break themselves free, to become a free nation. Well, it started off great, but in their minds, in their plans, so to speak, but they weren't. You know, all these men, the founding fathers and so forth. Remember, they were all Masons and so forth. So all this was a setup. All this was a plan. But remember, it had to be for in the last days. All right, verse 12, he exercises this. This is when it rose up in the land that was void of man, except a few Indians which came over here. No, they didn't live here through the flood. That's another tale that started another religion. Everybody started from Noah after the flood. They have found how the people came across, though. They found bodies on the trails coming across the frozen ice to the United States and Canada. They found this trail of dead bodies, one after another after another. They know how the people got here and how the buffalo and cattle got here. They were here when America was discovered, and there is evidence of this. You remember, we saw that in the New Moon film, how that came about. The Decalogue stone, okay, they call it Decalogue stone because it's actually, it's the Ten Commandments as written there. And it's written in Paleo-Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, if you can see. Now, those three circles there is the name of Yahweh, okay? And that's what it looks like. If you look at those three circles. You can see it better that way. Okay, this is in Los Lunas, New Mexico, okay? And that's just one of the places, you know. It's just one of the things that they have found. Of course, geologists and historians and so forth, you know, the scientists, the great men of this earth, ridicule it, and they will not allow it to be told because it goes against what mankind has taught. Okay, so he exercised, verse 88. So he exercised all the authority of the first beast. Notice all the authority of this one here in the two horns exercise. It follows the dragon, just like the first one. I like this. And caused the earth and those who dwell in it to worship. The same thing the dragon followed after these ways. Okay? Now, he says, what ways is he talking about, brethren? Well, look at what's going on in the world. And the lustful ways that are causing what we see today. It's easy to see now because it's taken place. Before, it was a little hard to see the end of it. Even today, people are still trusting in their governments and in their doctors. And the doctors are telling them, we're failing. This is being reported more and more. Science is failing now. They can't create cures fast enough because the breaking of these laws is creating curses and sicknesses, what the scriptures call curses and sicknesses, diseases, and wars. You know, there's no way that the doctors can keep up with these things because they don't cure anything. You know, they just treat the symptoms. They want to hide the symptoms and make people believe that they're okay because they don't see anything wrong with them, you know. Because man judges with the eyes. Remember what Yeshua said? Don't judge with the eyes. In fact, Yahweh tells you that. But Yeshua said, don't judge with the outward appearance. Judge inwardly, not what you see on the outside. But that's what the great doctors want you to believe, is that everything is going to be okay because, you see, you don't see any outbreak, right? Well, then you must be cured, Well, meanwhile, the disease is still in your body. It just, instead of being on the surface of the body, it went down now deeper into the organs in some other place and is moving throughout the body, trying to go somewhere else to destroy some other organ. And this is why a body breaks down and people start losing their sight, or they start losing their hearing, or they start, losing their heart and so forth, or lungs or liver and so forth. This is what cancers, this is why you have all these cancers and stuff, because, man is still living, but he's not reaching out to Yahweh to live righteously. And so all these curses continue to break down the body over and over and over. All right, verse 90 here, highlight these next two sentences here. Verse 13, he does great wonders so that he makes fire come down from heaven. This is done by the explosion of the atomic bomb and then the nuclear bombs, which have become more powerful. Okay? The atomic bomb and the nuclear bombs, which have become more powerful. And continuing on, he says, these are all the works of man's hands, as is shown in Revelations 9. Remember, they said they're not going to repent from them, right? They're not going to repent from the works of their hands. Notice the deception here. He deceives those who dwell upon the earth by those acts of power which he had authority to do. Remember, the Thessalonians says they have all lying signs and wonders and all these different things, right? We're seeing deception spread at this time all over the earth in many different ways. But remember, deception is a choice. People choose to be deceived. But that's why their minds are blinded at this time, where they can't make the right choice. We see the religions with their attitude set in people's minds that democracy is going to bring peace. Democracy is going to bring peace, but it never has. Yeah, democracy also bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Did that bring peace? Here's a testimony. This is pretty powerful, but this was a survivor from one of the bombs. So there was no air raid alarms on the morning of the 9th, 1945. We have been hiding out in the local bomb shelter for several days, but one by one, people started to head home. My siblings and I played in front of the bomb shelter entrance, waiting to be picked up by our grandfather. Then at 11:02 a.m., the sky turned bright white. My siblings and I were knocked off our feet and violently slammed back into the bomb shelter. We had no idea what had taken place. As we sat there, shell-shocked and confused, heavily injured burn victims came stumbling into the bomb shelter. Their skin had peeled off their bodies, and their faces had hung limply down on the ground in ribbons. Their hair was burnt down to a few measly centimeters from their scalp. Many of the victims collapsed as soon as they reached the bomb shelter entrance, forming a massive pile of contorted bodies. The stench and the heat were unbearable. That's the kind of stuff that mankind has taken over and has done to this earth. Well, let's go back to the book here. It says, verse 91, it's far from peaceful here. If you turn on your local news, you see that it's not peaceful. In fact, the furthest thing from peace. There's not even any security in the United States anymore, especially in the largest cities. Years ago, there was a book put out about how to survive in the coming hard times. It says, I've recommended that book. How many have read it? One thing that is recommended was that prophecy said that we would do is get out of the city, move and find a place in the country, because the cities are going to be ramshackled by people. There will be houses invaded and women ravished, as the scripture says. Continuing on here in verse 92, this is Revelation 13:14. They have the authority to do this in the sight of the beast, saying to those who dwell on the earth that they should make a likeness, or that we should be, as Yahweh says, man would be in his image or in his likeness. That word likeness, okay, it's in the King James, it uses the word image. It says make an image of the beast. But you see it's number 1504. It comes from 1503. It means a likeness, okay? a statue. I thought about a statue. Make an image. Okay, they have made an image. Every person who comes to America and immigrates, what's the statue that they see? The Statue of Liberty. Okay, who is a goddess. Okay, so it's the first thing that they see when they come in, and that goddess statue represents their freedom, the freedom of God worship. That's what they're coming to and becoming a part of as they take their oath to be an American. It means profile. It means representation. It's a resemblance. Okay? It comes from 1503, which means the idea of faintness as a copy, to resemble or to be like. Okay? To be like. So when it says that they should make a likeness of the beast, he's saying that they will be like the beast, the complete opposite of Yahweh, who's supposed to be, we're supposed to be made into his image, not the image of the gods. Being like the first beast, which had the wound by the sword and did live, and power was given unto him, and he had power to give life to the likeness of the beast, and that the likeness of the beast should both speak, that is, teach, and cause as many as would not worship the likeness of the beast should be killed. He says, if you remember Malachi Martin's information that he put in his books, the keys of this blood, he shows you that in his plan, that the Queen of Heaven will make war against all who will not worship her, and all who will not turn to her to worship will be destroyed. And the Muslim nations are going to suffer greatly, as will all those who will not worship Mary. And that's exactly what the beastly system has done to take peace from the earth. They've gone against all of those many nations. It caused a lot of trouble and destroyed their lives and their cities and so forth. That's why Damascus is becoming a ruined place, right? So that finishes up that chapter. The next week, the Kohen would take over in the next chapter.